This is the OverReaction podcast.
Tarah, welcome to the
Thanks.
OverReaction podcast. I really hope you overreact, but if you don't, I will be sure to overreact. Different things.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for agreeing to it. You're brave, or maybe a bit of a masochist, or both.
Or both. Yeah. Or I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm doing, which is probably accurate as well.
Oh, I doubt it. You know more than me. So I'm really looking forward. I've had some cool people on it, but I'm really looking forward to having you on. You're definitely one of the. I had this little list, that little spreadsheet. Like, okay, people have been asking me for years, Jeremy, got to do podcasts. You got to do podcasts. I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, you're kind of like a PG-13 Bill Burr, except probably not as smart and definitely not as funny. And so I finally said, okay, I'll do it. And then you were in my absolute top three. I had this whole list of here's 50, 60 people that I can think of the top of my head, and you were, I think, number 2 on that list, which is so. I'm long way of me saying I'm so excited you agreed to do it.
Well, I appreciate that. And who's number 1 so I can go take them out?
They haven't agreed yet. I don't know if they ever will. We'll see.
Awesome.
When they agree, I'll send you a DM and go, that was her, for example. So,
love it. Well, good. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Excited to share kind of my perspective and views and see where we react a little. So let's do it.
Well, why don't we start kind of at the beginning? Like, where are you from, and a little bit about your upbringing, if you want to, and then kind of get into how'd you get into healthcare and tech and marketing, that kind of stuff. Let's just start where are you from?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm originally from Montana.
Oh, awesome.
Love it. Born and bred. We call Canada, North Montana. So, there you go. You're welcome.
Well, I'm from Alberta. We called Montana Southern Alberta. Southern Alberta.
It's pretty
Just
much
kidding.
the same thing, really.
It's pretty culturally. It's really like I lived back when the dollar worked out. We would drive across the border to Great Falls. So we'd go to Great Falls, and then we'd go to, I had aunt and uncle in Billings. And so we would go down and fish when I was a kid. So we spent a massive amount of time in Montana.
Yeah. And we would go to Canada when we were 18 to drink. So
that's what everybody did. Yeah, we saw that happen quite a bit. Oh, your beer's got like 3 times the alcohol. Okay. Come on out.
Yeah, good old Canada. So yeah, from Montana. I've lived all over the place though. Like I've lived in
really?
Tennessee, Arizona, Nebraska, Idaho. Now I'm in Utah. Never thought I'd end up in Utah as a Montanan. I love it here.
Sure.
Love Utah. So much to love. Very much in the outdoors. I run, I hike. I took this picture of Chimney Rock down by Capitol Reef.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah. So that's kind of what I do in my spare time. My 2 kids keep me grounded, 2 young kids, and my husband, who's a mental health therapist. He's amazing.
Awesome.
And yeah, so getting into healthcare fairly early in my career, right after I finished grad school, I learned that I needed to work for a place that had a mission. I worked at a level 2 trauma center in Montana for a long time, loved it, loved healthcare, but I knew I couldn't be a clinician. That wasn't quite right for me. So I caught the healthcare bug there, and then I moved kind of back into, I did some financial services stuff and just learned like great people, loved the company, but the mission felt like it was sucking my soul dry. And so I thought, I just got to get mission alignment. And so went back to working at a hospital in North Idaho. Again, loved the mission. But I started to get frustrated with EMR implementation. So I was one of the early super users of, I think it was, oh my gosh, like MISIS way back in the day, writing the manual for ER intake. And I saw the potential for EMRs way back then, all this data, and we're just sitting on it. We're not doing anything with it. It was really frustrating. And when I heard we were looking to move, and I heard about Health Catalyst because we were looking at maybe Utah. And when I saw what Health Catalyst did, and at that time, this was 2013, this is when like data warehouses and that kind of thing were starting. And Health Catalyst was doing what we called the late binding data warehouse, which was kind of like healthcare specific data warehouse, which is a theme I think we'll come back to. I was like, lights are on. I'm like, this is the company that is going to change it. Like, this is exactly what we need to be doing with data. So I was bought in 100%. Super excited about the mission with Health Catalyst. And I've been here ever since, 11 years now. So in marketing roles, various marketing roles. So my master's degree is in journalism,
Oh,
my undergrad's in history. I call myself the accidental CMO. I never ever set out to be like, I'm going to be the chief marketing. Never. Not
yeah.
on my, mostly it just kind of made sense and I was good at it and I liked it and I kind of didn't want anyone else to have it. So just kind of accidentally got into it and turns out I really like it. And I have a great team and I'm kind of good at pulling these pieces together. So really enjoy what I do, which is I think pretty special. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
Absolutely. Where in northern Idaho, like Sandpoint or Coeur d'Alene or
Standpoint.
where? Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically Canada, I guess, again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We spent a ton of time since I was a little kid vacationing in Coeur d'Alene and Hayden Lake, like,
Oh, nice.
constantly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we were always going through. I actually really like Bonner's Ferry. Like that,
Yeah.
for some reason, because it was really, really small and it was a
hmm
kind of a weird little town. Had
Yeah.
some,
Right on the Kootenai River there. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely love it. And then we got a timeshare up just across the border in Canada. Then during COVID, we're like, we're going to sell the timeshare because who knows what the Canadians get at the border. They really went a little over the top, my fellow countrymen. So I'm like, okay, well, if we don't know if we can ever get it back there or what the rules are, I guess we have to sell the timeshare. But such a cool area. And you were in Sandpoint for how long?
About a little over 2 years. So I moved from Memphis, Tennessee to North Idaho, which is quite a shift, quite a swing. So yeah, you're a biker. Have you done Path of the Hiawatha up there? That rails to
I I,
trails?
I haven't. I did there's some like mystic trails on Lake Coeur d'Alene on the south, and I wanted to go
Okay.
hit I think it's Silver Lake Mountain or something like that. So I've never done the one you're just mentioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's worth it for sure. It's about
Is it?
15 miles, or 30 if you do both, which is what we did. But
Oh
yeah, it's
wow,
a lot of fun.
that's cool. Yeah, that lake it's Ponderay.
Ponderay.
Yeah, I was reading the other day that they used to do like in Second World War they did
Submarine.
submarine testing there
hmm
because
Yeah.
it's
So
like
Farragut,
1,600 feet deep or something.
it's one of the deepest lakes in the United States. I think it's the
Wow,
fourth deepest. And yeah, there's Farragut State Park, which was the former Farragut Naval Base. And what they did is they tested submarine paint, actually. So they would take them down to
really?
depth and then, yeah, and then kind of test. Yeah, they do submarine testing. It's extremely, extremely deep lake. Very beautiful, cold all the time.
Because
Uh,
it's so deep, right?
yeah, and it has a layer. There's actually kind of a layer where things get stuck. Um, as you go down further in depth, there's like the super deep layer, and then there's like the warm water up here, and then there's like a layer of like just debris of various kinds, and they find all sorts of stuff there. So it's an interesting lake.
Wow. Yeah, I just remember being like super artsy. There were tons of
Mhm.
like artists and things like that when we went through there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty progressive town. It doesn't necessarily fit the persona of the rest of North Idaho in that way. Like really progressive. Yeah, really, yeah, lots of art. I think there's a lot of really good things going for it. So yeah, I think one of my memories of the lake is actually had my boat and my boat ran out of gas on the lake. Um and I had to call to get towed, but then he boarded me and I failed like all the safety stuff. And so I got a ticket and a ride to fill up my gas tank. It was not a good time. So
Cops.
darn it, yeah. Serves me right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we got, I won't tell you stories when I was a kid. Like Coeur d'Alene. We got, yeah, no, won't go there.
Okay.
There were some
Probably smart.
teenage boys, I can tell you, unsupervised, super bad uh, yeah, it's a bad combination in a lake resort town.
I can imagine.
I had a lot of fun though. So without going into that, so the healthcare. So obviously you have kind of an altruistic streak where it's mission, or say mission driven, where it's more than I think most people that I've seen that are in healthcare, there is that altruism. They want to make a difference. Doesn't matter if they're a clinician or not. You're all kind of in, yeah, part of it. Whether doctors would like to admit that you help out or not, I think everybody's in it to actually help the patient in one shape or the other. So, but I wanted to talk a little bit about marketing. What do you think some of the main misconceptions are in generally in the industry about marketing, but misconceptions within companies are about marketing? I have my own views on it,
Yeah.
but you being in the belly of the beast and being in charge of it specifically, what do you think those misconceptions are, or what people get wrong?
Yeah. So I think probably one of the biggest things that people get wrong about marketing is I kind of joke everyone thinks they can do marketing until they try to do marketing.
Oh yeah.
And they kind of realize that there's a lot more to it. One of my big pet peeves is marketing that it's me too marketing, I call it. So it's like copycat
Oh,
marketing where somebody will go to
pins,
an event trade show and they'll
pins.
see this person's
Yeah.
using this word, transformation, whatever. Now we have to use that word. And so we copy
Yep.
them and then we see their website and we copy them. And so I think that one of the big frustrations that we run into as marketers is everybody bringing the kind of copycat ideas to us, and it almost stymies like this ability to have creativity and to connect with the marketplace in a different way. So I think that's one. I think another is that, especially in the space that I'm in specifically right now, which is healthcare technology marketing, which is a B2B type marketing, so business to business, people lose sight of the idea that the people who actually buy our product are people, right? They're not businesses. They have feelings, they have emotions. And so it's incredibly important to remember that, because people have feelings and they need to connect to the company and they need to understand that that essentially we're not just benefits and features. Like, we bring value, we bring partnership. You're connecting with the people at Health Catalyst as opposed to just, the technology that's involved. And from a marketing perspective, especially B2B, and especially with some of the stuff going on with like venture capital and PE, you get really trapped in this idea of like cost per lead and what kind of pipeline are you driving and what percentage are you converting and things like that. And that's interesting for some very specific use cases, but really brand building, brand connection, and building relationships that are long-term in the healthcare space is incredibly important. And a big part of that is because a lot of us are on our side and in the healthcare space are altruistic. They're in this for the mission. And so you can evoke those emotions and that mission driven orientation very easily. So I think those are probably two of the top ones. And kind of on that note, one thing I did want to hit on here is the fact that there is a lot of marketing BS out there about healthcare tech right now. And it's always been kind of a noisy, chaotic space, but my word, the last, I think, HIMSS I went to, it was just like, we're all saying the same thing. We're all yelling at each other and none of it feels real. And so the people who are there to learn more about our products are like people in the healthcare space, doctors, providers, administrators, don't believe any of it. And you know what? They shouldn't. They should be cynical. They should be skeptical. They should be asking the questions, and they should be ignoring the people who are just like screaming at them the same things over and over again. There's so much bad marketing right now going on. And it's just sad to see, but it also, I mean, on the other hand, it kind of makes our job a little easier at Health Catalyst because we can really connect with the mission and do things a little differently. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been doing a lot more calls with just CIOs and CMIOs catching up that I used to talk to over the years. And it was funny you brought that up because he was mentioning, the CIO was at he'd been to, I think he's 25 or 26 HIMSS. And he mentioned that the last time. It's like, it said, all these vendors, they kind of copy each other. Their colors kind of look the same. Their logos are starting to look a little bit the same. Just the style from a quick photo read, see it like just out of the corner of your eye, it isn't differentiating. Then they use all the terms. Like for a while, it was everything was fusion. Then it was 360.
Yep.
And then everybody claims they could do population health, and then everybody claims they do quality improvement, and then everybody claims they have AI, and it's really hard to cut through the white noise. And so a lot of them just tap out and say, forget it.
Yep.
Like, I'm gonna, I'll send somebody else. And to your point earlier, you mentioned about everybody thinks they can do marketing. We find the same thing when it comes to research. Everyone's like, oh, I took a class in my MBA program. Like, oh, great, here we go. Sure you can. And then we look at, I was just talking to a company last week, and they're trying to create this questionnaire to go to their physicians. And I'm looking at it, and it's like 27 questions. I'm like, woo. I'm like, so which 15 or 12 of these questions don't you care about getting feedback from? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I just want to know which ones you don't care about, because again, the physician, she super busy, super busy, and doesn't matter to your customer. They're only going to have attention span of a couple of minutes. So let's put all these super important questions up front. But it's interesting to talk about marketing. In Reaction, we call marketing adult supervision with our clients. In fact, we've had a couple friends of mine that are like chief revenue officers. They don't own marketing, and they'll say, Jeremy, we got to use your platform. We got to run our voice customer. We got to run market research, whatever. And I'm like, cool. Who's your VP of marketing or your chief marketing officer? Who's that person? Well, why do you need to know? I said, because if that's not our point of contact, or if they're not running this for you, we probably won't work with you. What do you mean? I'm like, sorry, you sales biz dev people, you're pretty linear beasts. You're not, everything to you is a straight line. B point, just smash through it, when sometimes you need to take a little bit more circuitous route. So we prefer to work with marketing leadership, and we call market leadership the adult supervision.
I haven't heard that before, but I like it. And it feels that way.
No, it really is, because we run into so many instances. And I'll say, yes, you're right. What you're saying is right, but it isn't going to resonate. Like, you have to put yourself in the mindset of that other person, the personas, the cohorts you're trying to engage with. What are they dealing with during the day? And do you understand the difference between a radiologist and a cardiologist, and a invasive versus non-invasive, or emergency physician, or someone who's working in coding, or someone who's working in quality? Like, you have to think about each one, and their eyes start to roll in the back of their head. They're like, oh. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Well, our solution helps. That's what's going to do. I'm like, yeah, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
You're assuming they have the time to sit and think rationally, and sit back and go, let me think about what you're doing. And marketing is that group, to me, that they understand the emotional and mental connection, not just the physical, like product, engineering, finance, whatever it is. They're all focused on the physical, right? Just like, here's the features. Marketing is like, let us show you how this is going to relieve your stress, that this is going to actually assist you. It's almost like a validation. Like, don't try to solve my problem until you understand my pain. Quit trying to tell me what the solution is. Do you understand me? In marketing, when done right, I think it enables that company to have an emotional connection before you're solving a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point about starting where they are, right? So let's take your population health example. And I've heard this before, and people have said it before, but you ask 10 people what the definition of population health is, and you'll get 20 answers. And so,
boy, that's true.
You can't just come out and say, we do population health. You have to understand, what does population health mean to this individual in this situation? And then back in, like, do we help them create better value? Like, what are we actually getting at here? What does population health mean? And healthcare tech right now is just so full of these buzzwords that really don't have a lot of meaning behind them. AI is another great example. What does AI mean? You're going to get the same kind of weird answers, right? Like, there's a difference between automation and augmented intelligence and data science. And I mean, just what does it mean in your particular context? And when you sit down person to person and start to understand, to your point, what are your problems that we're solving for you? What does your workflow look like? What is your objective at the end of the day with this technology? Then from a marketing perspective, we can back in and say, can we help you? Yes or no? And what words do we use to resonate with you? Instead of just, throwing population health out there and saying we do that and then, pissing you off down the road. Cause guess what? We don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, absolutely it is. That's a really good explanation. It got me thinking. So, I mean, you've been really successful, which is awesome. And how do you help kind of herd the cats internally in terms of, you have so many different competing, like the CFO is going to want to be heard.
Yeah.
Dan Burton is going to want to be heard. Sales people want to be heard. Product, CTO, whatever it is. How do you herd those cats internally and help them? And it's not like, because they're obviously experts. They're not stupid. They're just not marketing people by any stretch.
Yeah.
How do you take those inputs from them, but produce the content and the strategy and the approach, everything else that is going to be effective, while also telling them, I'm sure pretty often, that's interesting idea, that dog doesn't really hunt. How do you, I mean, that seems like it's part science and like super art as well.
Yeah. I actually have a whole hour-long presentation that I've given at marketing conferences that are exactly this question. And I call it winning your forgotten audience is what I call it, winning internal engagement. Because marketing people, we focus so much externally that we forget we also have an internal audience that is really important to engage with. So, but to distill that, I guess, presentation down into a few key steps, there's you have to build trust and transparency before you can tell anybody, why they're wrong or a different path. You need to build that relationship with them one-on-one. And so I spend a lot of my time really making sure that I'm connecting with people and listening to them, and then also showing through our work results over and over and over again consistently, and as obviously as I can. But when we show those results, we're not patting ourselves on the back saying, look how good marketing is. We're saying, look at your work. Look how your work is shining. Look at how your product is resonating, like kind of reframe it so that it's really obvious. And I say this to our internal teams. I say this all the time. Marketing only exists because of our amazing SMEs, our amazing product people. We rely heavily on that audience. And so our job is to make that work shine. And so making sure that we're kind of shifting the conversation that way. And then I think the other kind of important thing is knowing that when to let things fail, when to let things play out a little bit, because people sometimes have to learn on their own why things don't work the way that they do. So finding kind of little safe spaces for them to fail. So if it's like we do A/B testing with a webinar and then we show them, hey, this is why, your attachment to this one specific word isn't going to work. Here's the data. And then bringing them along in the journey there. So kind of showing them through data. I strongly believe in the art of data-driven marketing. And that means like you can make numbers say whatever you want them to say, right? Like as marketers, we do that all the time. But the art of it, that piece of it is being able to place it in the bigger context and understanding what does it mean and does it reach our objectives. So I think those are kind of two big things. And then the last thing that I'll kind of touch on here is always driving back to the why. So constantly asking, like, why are you asking for this one pager? What are you going to do with this one pager? Who is your audience for this one pager? And then as you have that conversation, usually it ends up they're not wanting a one pager. They're wanting like something completely different that is going to resonate more with the particular audience that they're looking for and allow for a continued kind of conversation. And so making sure that we stay humble enough, but we also kind of guide the conversation to say why until we reach kind of some larger objective. And then as far as like kind of fellow C-suite executives go, I think especially as kind of a woman in technology and that C-suite space, it's trying to walk this line of making sure that I'm coming across authoritatively, I'm coming across assertively, but I also am making sure that I'm giving space for, other people to talk and contribute, and that I'm kind of synthesizing that, and I'm not coming across as overly aggressive. So I'm just very aware of how I show up in these spaces. And I have to be very careful about how I think about that, because I need to be remembering, like, I'm representing my marketing team in this. And then as
Oh
you do that
yeah.
over time, you start building like confidence and trust, and then you can keep going. So it's not like something that can happen overnight. And it's interesting because the tenure of an average CMO is like what, like a year or 2 years. I don't
At a
think you can do.
company? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't do good marketing in a year. You really can't. Like, I'm sorry, no, you can't. So that's been really concerning to me, to see that kind of trend happening. Like, it takes at least 2 years to get things really good and moving, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear it's going to take 2 years to do the good marketing, which I guess is why we have such short tenure. But all these things take
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I've seen that. Now that you bring it up, because as you know, I'm on LinkedIn constantly. I probably post too much. Um, for some people, I know for sure I post too much. I've heard from them, but it's I have lots. I'm connected to lots of CMOs, lots of VP marketing, and it doesn't matter if it's a man or woman. That you're right. It's like a year or two and they're gone. Like I get pinged, hey Jeremy, just new CEO came in or CEO changed. I'm looking for a job. Looking for a job. Like I get pinged constantly, and it's kind of nuts. Like it does kind of suck how
Yeah.
important the right CEO is. And part of it is, do they see a long term? It's almost like parenting, right? I think our relationships at a principal level, all the principles are exactly the same. Now the execution of it's very different, but it's like same thing with my kids. It's what's my horizon when I'm trying to raise a kid, and how long does it take hard principles to kind of get mastered? Well, it takes a long time. Now, businesses you don't have the time horizon of a kid. You can't wait 4 years for something to happen in business, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but instead of it taking too long, the vast majority, I'd say the vast majority, it's very reactionary.
Yeah.
It's hey, we put this in place, we'll see how it plays off. And even I've seen it, even the chief marketing officer, they'll put in a plan. We're starting this in the first part of the year. What we're really going to start seeing is in late summer, early fall. We're going to start to see the fruit of it, and it's really going to take hold. And everybody agrees to it. But then some other part of the organization, I don't know, some weird thing happened. The board pushes down, but then all of a sudden they want results early Q2, and you're like, hang on a second, this whole plan was based on this. You are moving the goalposts.
Yep.
Stop moving the goalposts so much. Like I can see every once in a while, but the strategy, and I couldn't even imagine I talked to some people that had come from outside of healthcare into hospitals to try to help. They've come from like Disney, they come from whatever. And then after like a year or two, they're the ones who leave.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is bananas. We don't just move slow. We move so slow. We use every single excuse not to do something. I was brought in to change and to innovate and engage our patients and engage referring groups and our physicians. And we can do, and at every point, I'd say out of 10 ideas, 9 get killed.
Yeah.
And we do the one idea, which is the same thing we've always been doing.
Yeah. We're very risk adverse in healthcare.
Yeah.
And it does take kind of a specialized skill set to be able to be transformational. And then even that, what's best practice adoption is 10 years, 10 to 15 years. So, yeah, I would say that's really common. I think one other thing to note with short CMO tenure is there are different kinds of CMOs. So there are CMOs that really specialize in like a growth, best. So I think of them as like more point solution growth oriented CMOs, where they're really looking at demand gen, lead gen, kind of that more traditional B2B pipeline type stuff. And then there's CMOs that are like really good at scaling and upskilling into more like a corporate brand type. And then there's, CMOs who do what post IPO and publicly traded type work, where there's, a lot of other communications things thrown into that. And then you have like multiple audiences to worry about.
So you're a unicorn because you've done all 3.
I have done all three. I don't know if I'm a unicorn, but I have done all three. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean there are different skill sets, there are different focus points. You do have to be adaptable and flexible and think about what are my objectives here for each step of the way. And then keep a marketing engine on, right, the whole time. So, yeah.
And how do you, with your staff, you're hiring people, you're working with them, how important is the training that you provide versus the modeling of the right behavior or the right best practices or the right whatever? Is one more heavily weighted? Do you find that to make things stick and to make them successful on your staff?
Yeah, we hire, and I personally hire first and foremost for cultural fit. So you can
Smart.
really, yeah, you can really teach most anybody whatever it is that you need them to do. I mean, there's a few obvious key examples, exceptions to that. But if you have the right culture fit, meaning that they're hardworking, they're humble, they know how to collaborate with others. I've seen, very, very smart people fail miserably because they just couldn't collaborate with others and they just couldn't get the humility on board to say, oh, how do
Mm.
I synthesize all these different pieces? Maybe I'm not the smartest one in the room. And
So they're
so
not parallel processing using other people's brains and power. They're trying to do it themselves.
yeah, just very myopically focused. And
Okay.
I think, and again, you look at the altruistic side, there's people from outside healthcare who come into healthcare and they don't quite understand, like there's just a different ethos. And so
Mm.
I'm one, and this is a cliche, but I'm one that I don't care who gets credit for the work as long as the work gets done. And
That's
maybe
good.
this comes also from maybe being a little bit of a woman in this space too, because I'll serve up ideas and like kind of foster certain ideas and colleagues and male allies I have, and then eventually like it becomes one of their ideas and it's a good idea and we can move forward with it, and that's fine. Like I'm okay with that because this is the direction that we need to go, and if it's his idea, whatever, like let's do it
But
then.
but let's be honest. That's okay, and I think that's good for everybody. But I'm sure you run into some that are such takers you don't trust anymore, where there's zero quid pro quo. They just take constantly. I can't see them being long term successful in the role because they
They're
wouldn't
not.
just be taking from you; they'll take from everybody.
Yeah, and we have run into those, and they don't last long in the role, is
Yeah,
kind of what it comes down to. And at that point, what you do is um you stick true to your own principles and what, like, your integrity,
yeah.
and you make sure that you're just checking yourself all the time. Am I sticking to what I know is true? Am I controlling what I can control? And eventually it'll play out the way that it needs to play out. And sometimes that takes months, sometimes it takes years. Like it just and you can hold your head high and feel good about what you're doing when those situations arise. So I think, yeah, and that happen, men and women both like fall into that trap. It's not one or the other really. So yeah.
Oh, I think you're right. I think women are naturally a little bit more altruistic, big picture.
Yeah.
You can step back a little bit and go, the goal is that we just win. Who gets the credit we can worry about later. And then if it
Yeah.
becomes too unbalanced, then you're like, okay, it isn't that I want the kudos. I try to teach my kids, like, I personally don't need you to say sorry to me. I don't need the sorry. My concern is that if you can't recognize you're sorry and vocalize it, you're going to be limited in your growth as a person. Like, you need to recognize it and give and apologize, or, in this case, give credit, because you need to get outside yourself, because you want to draw people to you, and those that are magnanimous and they have that, I want you to win, they can tell that you care and that you
Yeah.
want them to win. Those people that can recognize and reciprocate a bit with you, they'll reciprocate with other team members, and then you don't have this division, I think, within a team or within a company.
Yeah. And then always driving back to the mission, right? So
Mm.
does this serve the mission? Yes or no? Is this a pet project that is a distraction or not? Um, so that's kind of the other piece to keep in mind, just like from an enterprise company level. Like, what is the
Yeah,
mission?
I like what you said earlier about you hire mainly for cultural, and then you kind of gave some items around it. I've talked to the most successful executives that I know, they have that same mindset as you. They'll say, unless it's something specific, like, well, they have to be a surgeon with these skills, they have to be a CPA, like you have to have these certifications.
Yeah.
But outside of those few roles where you have to have the right experience, they'll say every time that I've hired where primarily it's the person's experience, I've been disappointed and had to move on. Said, when I've asked them, and I think I know why their answers, but I want to hear from them. Said, well, why is that? Said, well, you can't, there's a few things. So what I look for now is a basic, do they have ethics? Because ethics is who you are. You can't put a bonus program to make somebody honest, because they will regress to the mean, right? They will return to their factory setting. Same thing with hardworking. You're either just a natural hardworking person or you're not. Those people that say, if you'll pay me more, I'll work harder, lack ethics. Like you just,
and it's not true.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So when you're working at McDonald's for minimum wage or whatever it is, you should work hard. If you don't like working there, you don't like the money, get a different job or ask for more, but don't, your ethics and your hard work shouldn't be determined. Now, maybe there's like super stretch goal, like this big bonus, you're going to go way, way above and beyond. And same thing with like intelligence. No bonus program is going to make someone more intelligent or creative or passionate. And so these executives, just like you said, that's what we hire for first by far, because that's intrinsically who they are, and that culturally align with our organization and me as a manager. And then I'll put some other things in place, but experience is really far down the list now. So, basically seconding what you just said.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I have a little trick I use, which is when I interview people, I ask, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? And then I listen to the answer. And if the answer is something along the lines of, I couldn't stop somebody else from making a mistake, or something like that, or they, it's not something that they've truly owned and showed accountability and growth for, that's pretty indicative to me of maybe there's not a lot of a growth mindset and humility here. So
yeah, that's a really good point. So what do you think is stopping in healthcare, the industry in general? Because you work for a pretty big company. You work on the provider side, and you work for a really successful company. It's grown, a lot of acquisitions, offer a lot of different solutions. What do you think is really stopping, or some of the things that are stopping real advancements in healthcare? Like, what is because there are really good ideas and there's really cool things out there. But what do you run into where it's like, it's almost like you want to choke people, like, why aren't you, this will really, let me help you. Something like Jerry Maguire or something like that.
Yeah. So innovation in healthcare, when it comes to patient care, I think one of the big things is we're just extremely risk adverse. And I would argue that we're almost causing more harm now at this point by not embracing some of these new technologies. So if, for example, care gaps, like we can identify care gaps using AI very easily, very quickly now. And we're still not doing it. We're still missing kind of basic 101 stuff like that. So,
and why do you think that is?
I think a big part of it is this. I mean, it's technology that we don't understand, we don't trust, and therefore, and physicians, especially, and nurses, have had very specialized training that they've come to trust and rely on. And if their license is on the line, they want to trust themselves and not like this black box technology that they don't fully trust. And I actually think that's one big thing getting in the way of the adoption of AI, is this idea that people need to understand the inputs, and they need to have a little bit of control over what the AI is going to output in order to trust it. And that this is something that's been shown by study after study, which is that physicians are people generally will trust results less if they can't control a variable within the algorithm that they're inputting. So the more that we implement into the workflow, and the more that we give people a level of control over how the AI works, I think the faster the implementation will be. until eventually we get to the point where the adoption is such and the acceptance is such that we are using it more in our workflow in a way that's more holistic. One example of this is like, automatic driving cars. So
Yeah.
like nobody trusts automatic driving cars because, every once in a while one drives into a wall or something and now we don't trust it, but there's like 14,000 cars that crash driven by people every day. So there's that kind of getting to that point where we're trusting the automatic driving car because now like we're letting go of control. So I think that's one barrier to the adoption. And then, yeah, from a patient safety perspective, we're just really risk adverse. I think another big one is things like pre-auth and insurance coordination, what insurance playing, and I'm going to wade into the, questionable territory here a little bit when it comes to like my opinion,
Sweet. Let's
but I'm going to
overreact.
say like insurance having an overweight view and what patient care should be.
100%.
It's
Why
actually
does
quite
prior
out of control.
authorization even exist? Like I can't. I just posted today. I blast prior auth. I swear every month I'll put out something. I can't get my head around
Yeah.
why we allow that massive waste and inefficiency. It hurts physician relationships. It certainly hurts the patient.
Yeah, and access to care too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a personal example. My son just got diagnosed with level 3 autism, which means that he needs the most services. And
Wow.
he's very much in need of help. He's, pre-verbal, like he's needing a lot of help. And I know the healthcare system very well, obviously. My
Yeah.
husband's a mental health therapist. Like you think that we would be very well equipped to handle this. And it has taken us a year at this point to go through the diagnosis to insurance approval to getting him his speech therapy to like all of these different pieces coming together.
Wow.
Like, and this is just like one extremely common condition. I can't imagine somebody who doesn't have R savvy trying to navigate this sort of thing. It's incredibly frustrating. Um, and I think so another kind of why isn't technology being picked up? It's because a lot of technology isn't created with like physician or patient experience in mind necessarily.
Well, amen to that.
Yeah, so like, and if you look at physicians and hospitals, they're very patient-centered, patient-driven, and so there's just misalignment in incentives, misalignment in experience, misalignment in journey, like all of it is just kind of misaligned. Same with like value-based care, right? I mean, such a misalignment in incentives, and yet we're still paying, RVUs for yeah. So I think healthcare has a long way to go when it comes to being able to holistically adopt these technologies, but I do think it's possible. And I think as people who are more native to these technologies kind of come up through the ranks and become the people in charge, I think we're going to keep making gradual process. So I'm an optimist. I may not sound like an optimist right now, but I am an optimist. I do think we're going to get there.
Professionally skeptical. I've heard the term. I'm
Yeah,
optimistic, but I'm professionally skeptical just
that's
based
right.
on experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of makes you're saying it kind of bums me out. I don't go to Walmart like almost ever. But I'm actually bummed out that they're tapping out. I think that hurt more than because patients they had the right idea. Patients want more convenience and more transparency, right? Like I've described it as being a patient. It's so frustrating. I've been in healthcare I didn't work on the provider side, but I've been in since 2003. So I've visited hospitals, talked to thousands of people, seen data. So I have a pretty good idea. And it's still really frustrating. I don't feel like the customer. I've never one time felt like a customer, not even close to it.
Yeah.
I get switched around at a moment's notice. You wait, you don't know. And if you say like, hey, I've been here like a half hour, supposed to be half hour ago, like, you know what? I do have another life. Like I have a meeting to get to, need to reschedule. Well, then it's going to be 6 weeks from now. Like, hey, why are you now mad at me?
Yeah.
And then you don't know what things charge. It's like going to the worst mechanic ever. Mechanics, unless they're rarely rare ones, they talk in technical terms. You sound like a moron. You really got to get this Fetzer valve. I mean, it doesn't have a Fetzer valve. Why are you even saying that? My car doesn't have that. You feel dumb. You don't know what things are costing. You don't know what's happening. And that's to something that isn't you. What has to do with you. And so I see a lot of younger generation people they're trying to go cash rate, and a lot of them are just trying to avoid, like people wonder, like, well, why are they going to these holistic hippie doctors and why are they going to chiropractors? Because you know what? They actually talk to them. They may be giving some voodoo stuff, or I'm just kidding. Some of them are legit, but they can get in, they can get everything they need on the app. They know what things cost ahead of time. They feel this is a normal encounter. And then when you enter the medical world, you're like, who's the customer here? Because I sure doesn't feel like me, and I can't get access to my information, and I got my Apple Watch, everything's here, but you have less than my Apple Watch has. Like, so I agree with you. The next generation of IT people, the next generation of doctors, nurses, and certainly the next generation of consumers, healthcare consumers, I think are going to accelerate the adoption, because I think all of them just get to the point where saying we're just not going to do it this way anymore. Or they might get completely corrupt in their Gen Xer like me and just put up with whatever.
No, I don't see
Hopefully
that.
not.
I don't see that. I have hope. Yeah. And the Walmart example is interesting because it's also just yet another example of somebody outside of healthcare thinking, oh, healthcare's easy. This makes sense. And then they get in it and they're like, oh, healthcare is really hard for a lot of reasons that we actually can't control. I mean, there's the legislation on the healthcare is insane.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got and by state as well, right? Because each state has its own, and then you have insurance, and then each insurance within its own, and how many Blue Cross plans are in each state. So it is really complex and it is really hard. And so it's always interesting when somebody from the outside comes in and thinks they can do it better. And I'm an optimist. I was hopeful, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So what do you and I talked a couple months ago, what do we call it? Like the healthcare hokey pokey.
Yeah.
Their left foot's in, their left foot's out.
Exactly.
But I was really hopeful for Walmart. I really was. I figured big company, they already operate on thin margins. They're not not like Nvidia, for crying out loud, where they're making like 70% margins or 80%. They're already thin margins. You looked at the people they hired, they were out of the industry. And they just didn't have the staying power. To your point earlier, like they're like a CMO in there, but it didn't work. We're out again.
Well, and I think, like they think they have thin margins. Look at health systems. A lot of health systems have 1% margin.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you're not going to get into healthcare to make money unless, you're a very specific niche, I don't know, EMR that shall remain nameless or something, right? Like, so I
2
think,
syllables, 4 letters.
Yeah.
I'll say it. I say it all the time. It's so fascinating. To your point about AI, that's a really good point because the doctors they don't have visibility into how is it making the decision. What are the variables that are going into it? And I kind of understand it, because you're like, hang on a second, can I just, and so it'll be cool to see software vendors and AI companies come out and be able to show that transparency to them, so they can have a kind of a quick reference to go, I know why I would do it. I know why this clinical decision support system does, because I can kind of see where it's coming from. I don't know where Miss medical assistant co-pilot, is that the term now for the little AI co-pilots? Which I guess it kind of makes sense, or assistant. I don't know where you're pulling it from. I don't exactly know where you're basing your recommendations. Sounds right, and if it doesn't sound exactly right, I'm going to ignore you.
Yeah, and healthcare is largely unstructured data. And large language models are trained on on data that is not healthcare specific, and healthcare uses words in such specific ways that
that's true.
It's just not trained right. Like, patient denies stomach pain. Denies means something different and has a different connotation in healthcare than it does in the rest of the world. But just that's one tiny little example of kind of that additional complication with trying to get LLM into healthcare. And the reason I bring that up is because one use case I see that I haven't seen anyone doing super well yet is care coordination with AI. So taking all the unstructured data from all of the different points, and even within the same health system, by the way. So for example, my kid goes to speech therapy at a facility here. I almost said the name. And then he goes to like the pediatrician at the same facility in general, and you wouldn't know it. Like they don't talk to you. Like there's no coordination. There's no like the book of Fletcher where it's like this is his flavor of autism right now. There's none of that. And then how many opportunities are we missing to care for people, and how many diagnoses are missed because a patient says one thing in this physician's office and says something else in this therapist. PT, same thing, you know. I got my knee taken care of, and yeah.
So how much of that problem is actually these big enterprise EHR vendors? They're supposed to solve that, but they also become, I mean, let's be honest, they may claim to do interoperability and they don't. They don't. Like they can say whatever you want. I've talked to enough Epic hospitals and like, no, we're still fighting it. Like they just are, right? And then there's companies that can actually solve it, but they're like, we can't, because we can't come in and just solve it. We can't actually do what the hospital wants. We have to do what the hospital wants, but we're also Epic or Cerner will allow it to happen. So like, so it's kind of frustrating. I've said before that real innovation at these hospitals occurs only at the level that a Cerner, or even more importantly, an Epic will allow it to occur.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think it's an unintentional consequence of HIPAA, where you can lean on patient safety and patient data and patient privacy
as an excuse.
As an excuse to say we need to protect this at all costs. And while that is very real, as we've seen with like the Change Healthcare hack, for example, like we do need to protect this data. I think,
or just put in a multifactorial authentication. That could have been easy to get around.
I think
Changes would have done that.
There is question there, right? And it's also who owns this data. So there's argument that the patient should own their data. And that argument has been put forth by an EMR that shall remain nameless. And yet when I try to get my data from that EMR that shall remain nameless, I can't access it. So do I actually own it? No. Who owns it? Does the healthcare system own it? Because if they own it, then they should be able to give it to whatever vendor it is that they think they can safely give it to. So yeah, it's a very valid point. And I don't know, I mean, HIEs, right, were designed with that in mind, with interoperability, trying to force that interoperability, force the whole care coordination between facilities. And we've kind of seen how that's gone or not gone, and various use cases. Sometimes it works better than other places, but really, you know, information blocking is real. And our like we just need to put some more enforcers in place so that way we can have the free exchange of data that we need to provide the best care for our patients at lower cost. And I don't think we're going to get around it without some sort of law.
And the only way you get around it, honestly, is if the patient owns the data. Because if the patient owns the data, it goes with the patient, then it doesn't matter where they go, right?
Yeah.
And it's, someone asked me a couple weeks ago, like, what company outside of healthcare do you think actually really long-term could force change? And to me, it was always Apple, because of the Apple Watch. And especially younger generation, I think, is a little more fitness obsessed, where they're tracking everything. And then Apple's like, it's all here. Yeah, there you go. Or Fitbit.
Google Fitbit,
yeah. Like a Google or an app. Google's problem is they've done too many ins and outs. They come in and out too often. They just need to just get in and stay in. But it's not as easy, because all these bugs that these big tech companies see in healthcare, their features are not bugs. So it makes it tough. I think someone like an Apple, that's like, if you can get tens of millions or hundreds of millions of patients in a country that are using your technology to easily track all of their different health aspects and do it, and then they just say take it anywhere, and then they just won't go to a hospital that won't accept it. They'll go, well, I'm not going to you. I don't care.
But patients have to have choice to do that.
Yes.
But they don't have choice, because we have insurance tied to our employer. And so we have to go where insurance tells us we have to go, and whether or not they take this or not. So that's another barrier point. Yeah. I mean, and so then it comes down to employers to have to choose plans that accept what their employees want, but then they have to listen to that. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Here I thought I had it all solved and just doused reality over my head.
You're welcome.
But you're right. You're right. It's just it's so complicated. I get it. It's such a, like, we're thinking about self-insuring as a company, like going direct, having a catastrophic insurance plan, and then putting all this extra money that we have, and then contracting with different physician groups in the area for employees, and just say, we'll just cash pay. Like, we are, like, every year it's 11% hike in premium. We don't want to screw our employees over and keep taking benefits away, but this is just getting bananas. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, your insurance shouldn't be tied to your employer. That was a temporary thing back in, what was it, World War I or World War II?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it became permanent now. There's no, I mean, what humane world would insurance your health be tied to the fact that you have a job, which is then tied to the fact that your job values you enough to give you insurance to take care of your health? Like, it's such weird logic. But then we start talking about universal health and one payer, and then we all may as well move to Canada, and we see how that's going. So,
and one of the reasons I left Canada is because of how bad it was. Like, my wife got diagnosed, I got diagnosed. We had friends, super problems, and we'd bring them to Great Falls. Like, no one goes to Great Falls for good health care unless you live in Canada. And then Great Falls is an improvement. Well, it's just waiting. Like, this friend of ours had a pretty serious accident, and he needed like a MRI on his shoulder and on his hip. But up in Canada, they looked at it and said, well, yeah, you're in like blinding pain, but we don't think it's serious enough. We'll get you in 6 months. And my dad's like, screw this. Put him in our Suburban straight across the border. We'll just pay for it.
Exactly.
So I can't imagine how a single payer would work down here in the United States. We're so fragmented.
No, it wouldn't work.
It'd be crazy.
No, I mean, we just need to systemize standard basics that we all kind of agree on. But again, then we have like differences in states, and we're United States, right? It's not a federal. I mean, CMS does what it can, but then there's flaws there too. So yeah, it's really complex. Yeah,
well, we're about out of time. Is there any question? It's been awesome. I've loved every second of it. Is there any question or thing that we should have covered that we just didn't?
I think the last thing could be around this idea of diversity. And I don't want to say the word diversity. I'd rather say the word inclusion, because what that means is, like, even in these processes that we're talking about from a patient perspective, take it to the boardroom, C-suite, businesses, how they run. I think the big thing that I look for and that I encourage is, if you are only meeting with people who look like you and who think like you, then you're really doing it wrong. So actively seeking out diverse opinions and making sure those people are in the room and that they're being heard and that they're a part of the process from the very beginning is incredibly important. And doing it from a workflow systematic perspective. Like, I don't want to be the token female in your boardroom. So I think maybe that's like the one big thing I would hit on is just, work on inclusion from a systematic level. Forget about, like, it's so politicized right now with like diversity and woke and anti-woke and, all of that kind of stuff going on. And there's like important narratives going on there, and there's important work, and like feelings are real. But at the end of the day, like, we can only control what we can control. And just, if we're working on inclusion, we're working on, are we talking to people different than us? I think we'll make progress there.
Oh, 100%. I'm glad. What a great point to end on. I mean, we'll talk about parallel processing, like those people that operate in silos, but in organizations, it's getting so many different perspectives. You're going to come up with better outcomes and better conclusions by doing it. Like, it only helps. Inclusion, when done really strategically, can only help.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's awesome. That's perfect. Well, thanks so much, Tarah. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile down in the description. I'll put a link to Health Catalyst. Do you have like Twitter account or anything else you want, you can send to me and I'll include it as well. So
Will
people
do.
can follow you because they really should. Everyone should
Speaking
follow
of
Tarah.
politics, I don't do Twitter.
Okay.
So, but LinkedIn's awesome. So I'll make sure, link to that, and then
I'll include it.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
And I have a blog at spinebender.com. I'll send you that too, where I
Oh, please do. Yeah, we'll post it. It'll
Event.
come out in, I think, in a week or two. We'll post this up, and please
Okay.
include any links you want. We'll put it in the description.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy.
Tarah, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Had fun. Thanks.
See
Bye.
you. Take care, Tarah. Bye.